With Hashem's help, we will learn today Yevamos Daf Lamed Zayin. We left off Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, 11 lines from the top. We learned yesterday, in the previous year, an argument between Tanoim regarding a person who married a woman who was pregnant or is nursing someone else's child. The Chachamim penalized the person for doing so, because doing that could prevent the woman from producing milk. If she is pregnant, we learned that in Daf Yud Beis, that in those days Chazal understood that a woman could get pregnant again, and the new child can kill the original child. Being that this person violated the Takanas Chachamim, so then for sure he has to separate himself from her by giving her a get. And Rabbi Meir held that he can never remarry her. And the Chachamim were more lenient, and they said that he could remarry her after that period passes. So Itmer, we learn something similar. B'chlal, we learned that any time a woman is married, for her to get married again, she has to wait at least 3 months. Because if she is going to be pregnant from the first husband, then she will immediately get remarried. Then we will have a doubt regarding who was the father of this child. The father can be the original husband. And even if she, let's say, gets married 2 months after she received the divorce from the first husband, she might think that the child that was born 7 months after her new marriage was fathered by the new husband. And this baby is a baby that's born after 7 months. So therefore the Chachamim held a person has to wait 3 months to be Mekadesh a woman after she gets divorced. What happened if Kitcha B'Teich Shloisha? What happens if he did give Kedushin to her during the 3 months? So really he violated Takanas Chachamim. And over here, before they had a chance to tell him to give his wife a get, Ubarach, he ran away. There's a machlekes in Rishonim. Does running away mean that he ran away to a place that it will take him the entire ending 3 months for him to return? Or he ran just to any other place, but he's not here? So Pligi bar Avacha v'Rafram, we have a machlekes between Amiroim, between Avacha and Rafram. Chad Omar, one of them says, Misham Tinon Lei, that we force him to come back and give a get. And how do we force him? By putting him into a ban. A shamta means a ban in nido yachedim. We learned that in Masechtas Moed Katan, different levels of bans. But this is the ultimate tool that a Beis Din has. They ban him, thus preventing anyone from walking within his 4 cubits, eating with him, drinking with him, learning with him, etc. And therefore he'll have to give her a get. And V'chad, another one of these two Amoraim, said that Iruke mistayo, that his running away resolved it for him. Being that he's not here, he does not have to come back and give her get. He only needs to wait until the end of the 3 months. Actually, there are certain Rishonim that learn that this is an Eitzah Tova that we give to such a man, now that he already violated and he was Mekadesh a woman within the 3 months. They tell him, don't wait here, thus the Chachamim will force you to give a get, run away. Now, being that the Gemara didn't know initially who said what, Chad Omar v'Chad Omar. So now the Gemara says that Hava Uvda, when such a thing happened, V'Omar Lohu Rafram was the one that told the husband that Iruke Mistaya, that you're running away, resolved it for you. So this clarified that Rafram was the one that said Iruke Mistaya. B'chlal, there's a rule when we learn Gemara that whenever we have a Chad Omar v'Chad Omar, as a rule, obviously with exceptions, but the rule is that the first Amayra is the first Chad Omar, and the second Amayra mentioned, like here, Rafram is the second Chad Omar. Okay, now the Gemara now quotes the Mishnah, Safik ben Tisha. The case in the Mishnah was that this Yavam did Yibum with the Almana, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven died, and Shimon did Yibum. And the child is born. Let's again give the example that Shimon did Yibum 2 months after Reuven died. And she indeed gave birth after 7 months from the marriage, 9 months after the passing of her original husband. So now we have a suffix whether the child was fathered by Reuven, and if he was fathered by Reuven, then she is asur on Shimon as the erev of Eishes Ach. And more than that, they don't even need a get. We learned that if that were to be the case, because it was not chal, the kedushin, the yibum. On the other hand, maybe Reuven died childless, and she taka fell for yibum, and Shimon's yibum affected a marriage, and the child is a baby from the second. So the Mishnah said that the child himself is for sure kosher, because mimanav shech, whether he was fathered by Reuven, meaning that Shimon's marriage was a prohibited marriage, but the child comes from Reuven. Or if the child was fathered by Shimon, meaning that Reuven died childless, which allows Shimon to marry the widow. So regardless, the child is coming from a kosher yichus. We don't know who the father is, but the child is kosher. However, this woman, the widow, and Shimon, the brother, the Yavam, who did this yibum, when there is a doubt, they both have to bring an asham talui. So Amalei Rav Rav Nachman. Lema, why don't we say, why does the Mishnah say that they bring an asham talui, which means that they bring a sin offering, which is a sin offering that's only brought when we have a doubt whether a sin was committed or not, and here indeed there is a suffix. Why don't we say haleich achar roiv nashim? Why don't we go after the rule of majority? And v'roiv nashim, the majority of women, Letitia Yoldan, give birth after 9 months. And therefore, why don't we say that the baby for sure was fathered by Reuven? Like the example we mentioned, Shimon did yibum 2 months after Reuven died, and the baby was born 7 months into the marriage, which is 9 months from Reuven, and let them bring a chatas. In other words, Shimon can still claim that when he married her after 2 months, it was not recognizable then that she was pregnant, so he did a sin b'shoigeg, but it was a vadai sin because of the roiv. So Amar Lei answers Av Nachman to Rava, no. That Nashe Didan, that the woman here in our neighborhood, Lishiva Yoldan, they give birth, it's common here, that they give birth after 7 months. So Amar Lei, to which Rava responds, Nashi Ditchu Hava Ruba de Alma. The Mishnah is giving a din, not only for the women that live in the location of Rav Nachman. In the world, the majority of women who get pregnant give birth after 9 months. So we have a roiv. So Amar Lei, so explains Rav Nachman to Rava, Hachi Kamina, this is what I meant to tell you. That Roiv Nashim Yoldan Latisha. True, the majority of women give birth after 9 months. Umiyut L'shiva. And there's only a minority of women that give birth after 7 months. However, there's another rule, and here the initial wording that will be corrected in a moment was V'chol Hayoledes Latisha. That whenever a woman is going to carry a child for 9 months, really even if it's for 7 months, Ubra Nikrar L'shlish Yomel, the baby will become visible after a third, which means after 3 months. And therefore, Vizu, the case in our Mishnah must be, like we mentioned, Shimon did Yibum, which was wrong, but he did the Yibum after 2 months after the passing. And Eino Chanami, if his new wife, if the Yevama, if Rachel would, after a month in the marriage, become visibly pregnant, then you're right. Why is she pregnant? She's pregnant because she's entering her 3rd month or entering the 4th month. That means she got pregnant from Reuven. Now it comes out that Shimon did a sin, and the chatas would be brought. But v'zu, this is the case that after a month of marriage, she's not yet recognizably pregnant. There is no hukar ubra, and hoyel v'lo hukar ubra l'shlishameh, since she's not visibly pregnant after 3 months. So isra le'ruba, so then the raiv is weakened, and since the raiv is weakened, that's why they bring an asham tali. Now the wording we had here was that all women become visible only after 3 months. So now the Gemara goes the opposite. If this is a rule by all women, so now let's say the opposite. Since after a month in the marriage of Shimon, which is 3 months after Reuven's passing, she's not yet recognizably pregnant. So why don't we say that's a vadai, that should be for sure bar shiva libasra'u, that should be a raya, that she's not pregnant from Reuven, because she was not hukar ubra. Why do you have to even bring an asham taloi? There was no sin. Taka machlekes between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, whether you need to do another maisa of yibum or not. And we paskin like Reish Lakish that you have to do another act of yibum because that yibum was not kosher, but that was not sinful. So Ella corrects the Gemara. Rav Nachman meant Roiv hayoledes letisha ubra nikar l'shlishimel, that most women who are pregnant become visibly pregnant after 3 months. And v'hai midolei hukar l'shlishimel, and since she was not visibly pregnant after 3 months from the passing of Reuven, only after 1 month from the marriage to Shimon. So Isra leruba, the roiv, that most babies are born after 9 months, that majority becomes weakened, and therefore we remain with the doubt, which is why the Mishnah says that they both have to bring a Asham Talui. All right. So now that we spoke about this suffix, this child, who we do not know who his father is, now the Gemara is going to quote a Braisa that will contrast the suffix to the next child that will happen, that will be born from this marriage of Shimon and Reuven's widow. So Tana Rabbanim, we learned in a Braisa that Rishon, that this first child, where there's taka doubt, and like we explained in the Mishnah, that even though there's a doubt who his father is, but the child is for sure a kosher child, whether Reuven is the father, whether Shimon is the father, because if Shimon is the father, that means Reuven did not have children. So then the union between Shimon and the widow Rachel was not a erva, but it was actually a mitzvah. However, so Rishon, therefore, Ra'oi Leo is Kohen Gadol. The first child can even become a Kohen Gadol. Says Tosfos, the second to last Tosfos in the Amid, but didn't we learn in Masechtas Ksubis that a shtuki, which is a child who does not know who his father is, as we'll see soon in the Sugya, a shtuki Kohen cannot even do the Avodah. He can't even serve as a Kohen Hedyot. So why are we saying here in the Braisa that the first child can be a Kohen Gadol when we don't know who the father is? So Tosfos says that there in Ksubis, when we speak about a shtuki not being allowed to do the Avodah, that is when we don't know who the other father is. Here we know for sure it's either Reuven or Shimon. So even though we don't know for sure where the father is, since whichever one it is, the child is not a mamzer, the child can do the avodah, even as a kohen gadol. However, if Shimon wrongfully stayed with this Rachel, and there's only a doubt, the doubt is that maybe Taka, the first child, was conceived only by Shimon, meaning that the widow was a widow from Reuven who died childless. So the union between Shimon and Rachel is a mitzvah tzibum, but maybe not. And therefore, V'sheni, mamzer misafik. So the Chachamim use words that will be explained in the Gemara, one way or the other, that there's a doubt. Now there's two ways of learning it. One way is that since there is a doubt, Shimon should not have stayed with Rachel. And if he did, because of the suffix, we paskin that the child has a din of a mamzer vadai, or mamzer misafik means it's like a suffix mamzer. That there's a doubt whether the child is a mamzer or not, and the difference between the first and the second option is huge. If because of the doubtful union, the Chachamim considered the child a mamzer vadai, then this mamzer can marry another mamzer. A mamzer cannot marry into the Jewish community, but a mamzer can marry a mamzeres. However, if there is a person that has a status of a doubtful mamzer, a suffix mamzer cannot marry a mamzeres vadai. So the question will be, is the meaning of the Tanakama mamzer misafik that the person is a vadei mamzer because of the doubt, or did the Chachamim mean that there's a suffix mamzer? And we'll see that in a moment. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that ein mamzer misafik. Whatever the Chachamim meant, it's not that; it's the opposite. So now the Gemara says, Maika Amar. So we have a machlekes between Abaye and Rava interpreting the meaning of the Tanakama, and therefore likewise interpreting the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amar Abaye explains Abaye Hachika Amar. This is the meaning of the Tanakama, that Rishon can be a kohen gadol, like we explained the Manavshach, and V'sheni, the meaning of Safek Mamzer. The second child is only a doubtful Mamzer. Not a mamzer vadai because of the suffix. No. That it's a suffix mamzer. And therefore the chumrah will come out according to Abaye's interpretation of the Tanakama, v'asur b'mamzeres. This child cannot marry a mamzeres because the child, it might not be a mamzer. And a mamzeres cannot marry into the Jewish community. And on this, Rabbi Eliezer amends the Bach Aleph. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that einoi suffix mamzer. What does he mean? But the child is a vadai mamzer. It's a case of a suffix Shimon should not have been with Rachel, and if it did so, the Chachamim considered the child a Vadai Mamzer, and therefore, according to this understanding, Abaye's understanding, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov will be lenient, and he'll say, Umutter b'mamzeres. Comes along Rava, and Rava says exactly the opposite. Hachi ka'amar, this is the meaning of the Chachamim, that Risha, in the first child, like we mentioned in the Mishnah, Roi, Leah is Kohen Gadol. V'sheni, what did the Chachamim say? The Chachamim said, Mamzer misafik, which means, according to Rava, that Mamzer vadai because of the suffix. And therefore, according to Rava, the Chachamim were those who had the lenient opinion that umutter b'mamzeres. However, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that ein vadai mamzer misafek, that being that this is a case of a doubt, because like we mentioned, maybe Reuven did not have any children, maybe the union between Shimon and Rachel is a mitzvah of yibum, elo safik mamzer, and being that it's only a doubt, how can he marry a mamzeres vadai? He's aser b'mamzeres. Says the Gemara that this argument between Abaye and Rava is connected ukomifligi with the understanding of the Tana of Rabbi Elazar. The Tana we learned in Masechtas Kedushin. Rabbi Elazar says that vada'on bevada'on mutter, that a vadei mamzer with a vadei mamzeres can get married. However, vada'on bisfeikon, however, a vadei mamzer with a safik mamzeres, or a sfeikon, a safik mamzer bevada'an with a vadai mamzeres, or one doubt with another doubt. He is a doubtful mamzer, and she is a doubtful mamzer. Says Rabbi Elazar, the Tana Rabbi Elazar, asur. They cannot get married. Now we have to explain who is a safik mamzer. So here the Mishnah in Kedushin gives three examples. The Elohein Sfeikon, either a shtuki. A shtuki is a child who does not know who the father is. So when he asks his mother, where is dad? The mother tells him, Shah, be quiet. The meaning of shtuki literally means shvaig, still, because we don't know who the father is. And asufi means a child that was found in the street, and we gathered him in, we adopted him. And we don't know neither who the father is, nor who the mother is. Being that we don't know who the parents are, maybe the child is a mamzer. Vikuti, we learned this many times, the nation that were brought by Sanchedav into Eretz Yisrael. And they, as Rashi explains, they did not accept Gezerah Shabbos. Therefore, when it comes to doing an act of Kedushin, as we will, God willing, learn in the beginning, the first Mishnah of Masechtas Kedushin, that Hoisha Niknes b'shleisha darachim b'kesef, b'shtar u'b'biyah, that you can, in fact, the Kedushin is done through either giving her something of value, money, or giving her a document, or through an act of intimacy, as we'll learn there in Kedushin, that the Chachamim later prohibited people making an engagement through biyah, through an act of intimacy. However, the Kutim who did not accept the Gezerah Shava, they did not make this type of learning in the Torah. And as the Gemara there says, how do we know that one can acquire a wife through giving her money because kicha, you have the Gezerah Shava mistay Ephraim? Being that they did not accept the Gezerah Shava, they did not accept that Kedusha Kesav infects a Kedushin. And likewise, when it comes to shtar, that how do we know that you can engage a woman, that a biblical engagement can be effective through giving her a document? Because it says, v'yotza v'haisa. The pasuk puts together, there's an hekesh between a get, sending a woman out, and marrying a woman. Just like by a get, by v'yotza, it's done through a shtar. So likewise, the Chachamim learned that v'haisa, that marrying a woman, engaging a woman, can also be done through a document. The Kutim did not find these two kinyanim valid. And therefore, amongst the Kutim, a woman, let's say, who received Kedushin from a man through money, she was not considered a married woman, an engaged woman. And therefore, if she later decided to break off that commitment and she went and married another man, really, al pi Torah, she's a married woman. And the children will be mamzerim. The Kutim did not accept that. So therefore, we put a doubt on all of the children of Kutim that they are safik mamzerim. So this is what the Tana Rabbi Elazar says, that a suffix and a suffix cannot get married, right? Rabbi Elazar is machmer, because one could be a mamzer, and maybe the other is not a mamzer. So you can't have a marriage between a mamzer and a kosher Israelite. And the Amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda said the following, that Rav told me halachas ka Rabbi Elazar. However, says Rav Yehuda, that when I repeated in front of Shmuel that the Rav said the halach is like Rabbi Elazar, so Shmuel told me that it can't be correct. Amar Li, Shmuel tells me, Rav Yehuda, it can be because Hillel, Shana, because we learned the Mishnah from Hillel. And obviously, if it's between Hillel and Rabbi Elazar, Shmuel holds we got a paskin like Hillel. And what did Hillel say? And this is the Mishnah that we have in the beginning of the fourth Perek, of the final Perek in Kiddushin, Asara Yuchsin Olu Mi Bavel, that when Ezra brought up from Babylonia to Israel the Jewish community, building the second Beis HaMikdash, he brought with him Jews from all categories. And the Mishnah there enumerates 10 different types of pedigree, of genealogy, of yichus that exist amongst the Jewish people. And let's count them. He brought back up into Israel, into Eretz Yisrael, Kahani, and Leviim, and Yisraelim, Chalalim. A Chalal is a person that is born from a Kohen, God forbid, marrying a woman who a Kohen is not allowed to marry. So for example, if a Kohen marries a divorcee, he's violating a lav. However, the Kiddushin is typhus. The children that are born are called unholy Kahanim. Kahanim Michulalim. Likewise, if a Kohen violated the rabbinic law and he married a woman who underwent chalitza, so the children are chalalim, the child is a chalal. Or a gay converts. Charure means non-Jewish slaves that were emancipated, and that emancipation is their conversion. Or mamzedim, and he brought over Nisinim. We learned that not so long ago, that when Yehoshua conquered Israel, there was a group of people called the Givainim, that they were really descendants from one of the 7 nations with whom Hashem told us we have to drive them out of Israel, and if they were to stay there, we have to kill them. But they fooled Yehoshua, and they made believe that they belonged to another group, and they ultimately got a conversion. And after they got converted, they told Yehoshua, we are who we really are. So what Yehoshua did to them is he designated them as slaves. He designated them by giving them the work of being the water carriers and the wood choppers, and they have a din of a separate category of avodim. And the final 2 was shtukei and asufei. So these are the 10 categories of yuchsin, of people with different types of genealogy, all of which were taken into Israel. And now came along Hillel, and Hillel said, V'kulan mutarim lavoi ze bozeh, that they all can marry within each other. And as all of the Rishonim point out, obviously Hillel did not mean that any one of these 10 can marry any other of these 10. Let's just begin with mamzedim. Mamzedim are not allowed to marry into the Jewish community. A mamzer can only marry a mamzeres or a convert. So what did he mean? So really, Hillel grouped those 10 into 3 categories. The first category is Kahanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, that they can marry within each other. The second category are Leviim, Yisraelim, Chalalim, Gerim, and Charurim. They also can marry within each other. And the third category are Gerim, Charurim, Mamzerim, Nesinim, Shtukim, and Asufim. Now, a mamzer means a mamzer vada. Shtuki is the case we're speaking about. We don't know who the father is. That's a suffix mamzer. And Hillel learned that everyone in each category, including the third category, could marry within each other. So here we see that what does Hillel hold? That a shtuki, a person who we don't know who the parent is, they are considered like a vadai mamzer, which is why Hillel allows them to marry a mamzer. Unlike Rabbi Elazar, who says that a suffix with a vadai cannot get married. And being that Hillel said one way, he said leniently, are you paskening like a Rabbi Elazar? That's machmer. So now the Gemara just clarifies who holds like whom. Abaya, who held that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was the one that was mekel, that was lenient. He holds like Shmuel. Shmuel holds that halachas like Hillel. And Hillel said that a shtuki could marry a mamzer. In other words, a suffix mamzer halachically is like a vadai mamzer. And therefore, everyone wants for Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion to be aliba de hilchasa, as we'll see in a moment. Since we know, according to Shmuel, the halacha is like Hillel, and since we have a tradition that the Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is called Kav V'Naki. Kav means it's a very limited. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov gave very few opinions throughout Shas. There is not that much from him, but the little that we have is naki, is clean, is pure, and the halach is always like him. So being that we know halacha should be like Hillel, and halacha should be like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, so that is why Abaye held that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was the one that was lenient. Rava holds like Rav, that holds like the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, who was machmer. So he also umaykel Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov aliba de hilchasa again kehechad leitiksha hilchasa a hilchasa. And let's look in the Flamed Zayin Amud Beis the top Rashi, because the Kaimelon Mishnas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kavenaki. This is something that's written in Masechtas Gittin, and halacha is like him. Okay. Continues the Gemara. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Mino Amin Allah. How do I know? The whole stekel Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kevadoi mashilai. How do I know? According to Abaye, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is mekel, meaning that we consider a suffix mamzer, that they have a din of a vadei mamzer, which is good for them, which makes it easier for them because they can at least marry another mamzer. Titanya. We learned in a Braisa in Tesefton Kedushin, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that harei shebo al noshim harbe, that if a person, God forbid, if a person had relations with many women, and the eino yodei al ezu mehemba, he doesn't know with whom. In other words, there's going to be a child, but he doesn't know who the mother is. V'chein, or reverse, if there's a woman, shabo'u aleha, anoshim harbe, that many men had a relation with her, and ve'eno yoida'as, and she doesn't know, me'eza mehem kibla, she doesn't know from which one did she get pregnant. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that's a terrible thing. Why is that a terrible thing? Because being that we don't know who the father is, being that we don't know who the mother is, there's going to be a possibility that siblings will marry each other, that eventually, God forbid, by accident, a father might marry his own daughter, not knowing that she is his daughter, and from such a union, any union that violates a love that has kaddish on it, produces a child that's called a mamzer. So there'll be mamzerim that don't even know that they are halachic mamzerim. And all of a sudden, the world will be filled with mamzerim. So Nimsa, it's going to come out av noises bitoi, that a father accidentally will marry his daughter. V'ach, or a brother will marry his sister. And then ismali kol oilam kuli mamzerim. And va'al zen nemar, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov quotes the pasuk. The beginning of the pasuk is al techalal es bitchal haznoisa, that don't allow your daughter to profane herself by becoming a zayna. V'loi tizne ha'aretz, so the earth should not be filled with acts of promiscuity. Because if that were to happen, says the Gemara, umala haaretz zima, the world will be filled with znus, meaning over here will be filled with mamzerim. So here we have a statement in the pasuk that the world will be filled with zima, not with suffix zima, but with zima. So l'chayr, it comes out, Abaye has a proof that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov considered the child who is only in a doubt whether they are or not a mamzer, that humala haaretz, certainly they are considered children produced from znus, and they're considered mamzerim. This is a kasha on Rava. So Rava says, Rava Amar Lach, that the meaning of zima is not that the world will be filled with mamzerim. The word zima is a noitrikain, it's an abbreviation. And the abbreviation is from the words zu ma hi, that the world will be filled with children that we don't know what they are, whether they are or not mamzerim. And according to Rava, being that there's only a suffix, it makes it worse for them because they cannot marry a vadei mamzer or vadei mamzeres. And now that we quoted this Braisa of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, continues the Gemara, and we learned this together here, Masechtas Yuma, that yes, at Al-Kain Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov added something else. In other words, to be careful not to do anything that eventually can lead people, unbeknownst to them, to produce mamzerim. That lo yisa adam isha b'medina zu, and v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina acheres, that a man who is married in one country with his wife and has a family. In those days, men were permitted to have more than one wife, but they were not allowed to marry another wife if she lived in a completely different country. In those days, there were no communication. So if a man were to go to another country and to have another wife over there, the children from either marriages will not know each other, and no one will know who the father is, and God forbid, accidentally later, one brother can marry a sister. Shema yizdavgo zeh lo zeh. Maybe the children will do a shidduch one with the other, and a brother will marry a sister. This is the whole issue when it comes to sperm donations. That the reason why Rav Moshe wrote in his tshuva that if you are to do so, it's better to take sperm dafka from a non-Jew, because if the donor is a Yid, then we don't know who the father is, and it might end up happening that a brother will marry a sister, mamish like this. So now the Gemara challenge is, are we afraid that because of Shema Yisa Achoisai, that a man is not allowed to marry a woman in another country? Eini, it can be. We learned this together. That Rav Ki'ikla, when Rav used to travel to the city called Dar Deshir, whenever he went to the city of Dar Deshir, Machris v'Amar, they used to announce, as we'll see later, before Rav came there, Man Havya Liyoima, who would like to marry Rav for the day or for the few days that he's there. And it was evidently when Rav traveled, as we'll see soon, he didn't want to stay without a wife. He used to come to a place, he used to marry a person they knew from the outset that before Rav will leave, Rav will give them a kosher get. But for the days that he was there, he married them. Now the question is, how was Rav allowed to do that? Being that those children will not know the other children of Rav, and maybe one sibling will marry the other. And likewise the question is, Rav Nachman, who had the same custom of Rav, that Ki Ikla, whenever he traveled to the city called Shechansiv, Makris v'Amar, announcements were made, Man Havel Yoima, who would like to marry Rav Nachman for a day or for a few days? So the Gemara answers, that's not a question. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's law that a person is not allowed to marry a wife in another country is correct, because it might lead to children, siblings marrying each other. Because when you have an absentee dad, as we call it here, when people don't know who the father is, even if they will know when they're young, they'll forget about it, or they won't mention it. He's absent. But if the father is a Rabbanan, but if someone was fathered by Rav or by Rav Nachman, the Pekiah Shemayu, he is famous, everyone will know that who is your father? Oh, my father is Rav, my father is Rav Nachman. So they will never end up marrying other children of Rav and Rav Nachman. And now the Gemara has a technical question on this minig of Rav and Rav Nachman. Apparently, in the Havamina, they used to make this announcement when they came to the city, and if someone wanted to marry them, they married her immediately. And the question is, we know a din from Rava that tiva uha li nasei. This is a halacha lemaisa today, that when a man proposes to a woman to get married, v'nespaisa, if she accepts the proposal, tzricha leishav shiva nekiyim, you have to have at least a full 7 clean days that she's counting as 7 clean days, and then mikvah before they get married. In other words, there's something called dam chimud, which means that when a woman who did not know who she will marry, when she now knows that she will marry so-and-so, from her desire to be with him, there's a possibility that some blood can leave her womb, rendering her a nida, which is why halachically today, once a chassan and kala set a date, and she already is counting her 7 clean days, if they were, for whatever justified reason, if they were to move the date of their wedding, then in most cases they have to start counting another 7 clean days, even with the same husband. And certainly over here, all of a sudden she gets engaged to Rav. How can he marry her immediately? You would have to count 7 clean days. So the Gemara gives two answers. Answer number 1 is Rabbanan shluchayu havim mishadri, that before Rav traveled, before he came there, shluchim of Rav came there and told people Rav is coming in a week or 2, and they already asked, are there any people locally that would want to marry Rav for the few days that he was there? And they agreed more than a week before Rav married them. So indeed, they had the time and they counted the 7 clean days and they went to the mikvah. Another second answer is, and this is an interesting answer, that L'Rabbanan Yechuda Ba'al Mehud Meyachtilahu, that Rav and Rav Nachman married them even though that they were halachically considered nidois, which means that they were not allowed and they did not have a relation with them. So why did they marry them? They were only there for 1 day. Maybe you can have the girsa for a few days. But what was the point of marrying them if they were not allowed to be together anyway? So the Gemara explains, the Amar Mar, the master taught us, we learned before, that Eina Doima, that you cannot compare Mi sheyesh lepas b'salei, someone who has bread in his basket, lemi, to another she'ein lepas b'salei, that does not have bread in his basket. That both people could have eaten meal number 1 at the same time. But the person who has bread in his basket will not get hungry until much later. He will not be thinking the whole time about food. Unlike the other who does not have bread in his basket, will right away after the first meal already be preoccupied with his next meal. Likewise, being that Rav was traveling away from his family, he did not want to get preoccupied with thoughts of this nature. So he felt that he will have another wife. The very fact that he has another wife, even though that for them to be intimate you have to wait until after the 7 clean days, the fact that they are married together, it will be considered psychologically for Rav that he has pas b'saloi, and that in itself will take away his over focus in having a relation with a woman, and he'll be able to devote his time better to doing what he was doing there, teaching Torah, spreading mitzvahs, etc. I ask all of the mefarshim here that we have a rule today that if there is a chupas nida, the man and the wife cannot be together. They can't even have yichud together. In order for a man and a woman, or his wife who's a nida, to be allowed to be together in the same environment, without violating the Torah prohibition of yichud, you have to have 2 conditions, both conditions. Number 1, that they will be allowed to be together. They will be allowed to be together exists over here, because they were married. But it also has to be under the condition that they were already once together. Which is why when a chassan marries a kala today, if she was a nida during the chuppah, even though that she will become tahar, whenever her 7 clean days will end and she goes to the mikvah, but since they were never together, they can't have yichud. So how was Rav allowed to marry them, even if not to be with them? How can he have yichud ba'alma? So many mefarshim answer that when do we say that a man cannot have yichud with his wife if she is a nida and he was never yet with her? That only refers to a man who was never married. But Rav and Rav Nachman, who were already married men, they were allowed to have yichud with their wife, being that she will become tahira for them. Let's continue in the Gemara. Tana, we learned Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Lo yisa adam ishtoi, that a man is not allowed to marry his wife, v'datoi legarsha, when he has in his mind to divorce her. In other words, we want to make it clear that when Rav and Rav Nachman, when they used to marry women for a very short amount of time, without doubt, those wives were notified beforehand that they will only have their marriage during the time Rav is in that city. That's okay. But for a man to marry a woman, and she thinks that she's marrying him like a marriage should be, forever, and he has in mind to divorce her, if he has his mind to, first of all, don't marry her. And once a man has in mind to divorce his wife, then he should certainly not be with her. And why? Mishum shenemer, because it says that al tacharosh, al reiacha ra, do not devise evil on your friend. When your friend is sitting lebetachitach, when your friend is sitting secure with you, that pasuk in Mishli is referring to a man who's marrying a woman from the outset with a kavana to divorce her after a short period of time. So this ends the beginning of the sugya of the Mishnah of Yibum. And now from the 2 dots all the way until the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Ches, we're going to have, I think, a total of 7 or 8 cases which are relevant to the laws of Yerusha, which are connected to the laws of inheritance, regarding the doubtful child that we learned in the Mishnah. So a quick recap. What did we learn in the Mishnah? Reuven is married to Rachel, and Reuven dies. And Shimon goes ahead, and after 2 months, Shimon does Yibum with Rachel. And after a few months, Rachel appears to be pregnant, and now there's a doubt. What's the doubt? Maybe this child was fathered by Reuven. And as we explained in Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, even though if that would have happened only 1 month after the marriage, Rachel would have already appeared to be pregnant, and it did not happen in this case. But on the other hand, most children that are born after a full 9 months of gestation. And this child was born only after 7 months from the Yibum between Shimon and Rachel. So we have a doubt who the parent is. So before we learned B'negeh to the laws of Yichus, genealogy, that the child himself for sure is a kosher child. But now let's speak about this child, and the Gemara is going to call him a suffix, this doubtful child. In this context, we don't know who the father is when it comes to the laws of inheriting. Who will he inherit from? From Reuven or from Shimon? Gavaldik. So case number 1, suffix v'yavam. If this child, which we will continuously call the suffix, and Shimon, who's the Yavam. We know, and we learned this before, that the Yavam inherits all of the possessions of the brother who passed away, in exclusion of all other brothers, because he did Yibum with the wife. Now obviously he will only inherit from his deceased brother if what he did is called Yibum, which were to mean his Yibum was only a Yibum if Rachel was not pregnant from Reuven. On the other hand, the Safek, if the Safek was fathered by Shimon, then he doesn't get anything directly from Reuven. He gets inheritance from his dad, Shimon, and if there are other siblings, he gets it with them. But if the Safek was fathered by Reuven, then he should be the one getting all of the inheritance from Reuven. So Safek v'yavim shabo lachleik b'nichsei misna, they come to inherit the belongings of the dead, of the one who passed away of Reuven. Safek Amar, this child is saying, Ano bar misnohu, I am the son of Reuven. I am the son of the one who passed away, and therefore, unachase didihu, I should be the only one inheriting everything that he owed. On the other hand, the Yavam is telling the Bezdin, the Yavan Amar, ad berai didiat, you are my son. And therefore, you should not get anything in his belonging. So what do we do? So halacha number 1. Have a mamein hamutal b'safik, the money, the possessions of the deceased, of the misna, is possessions that do not have a muchzak. The word muchzak, let's get familiar with that, is words that we learned together in the beginning of Bava Metzia. When it comes to monetary possessions, the Chachamim hold that whoever is in possession of them, if I have something in my possession, then we use the words, I am being machzik, or the possessions are in my chazaka. And the Chachamim hold that whoever is the muchzak is the assumed owner, and whoever wants to take the possessions out of the muchzak, hamaitze mechaveiroi, all of haraya. The onus of proof is on the person who's trying to take the possessions away from where it is right now. Sumchas there, in Bava Metzia, says that even when there is a muchzak, whenever there's a doubt when it comes to money or to anything that has monetary value regarding who is its owner, you divide that in between the people upon whom you have the doubt. That mamein hamutul b'safik choilkin. Now, even the Chachamim that say that whenever there's a doubt, you leave the possession with the person who has chazaka over it, that's only if someone is the muchzak. That's only if someone is the presumed owner. In our case, case number 1, between the Safek and the Yavam, no one here is a muchzak, the way Rashi explains. Because each one is claiming that I am the heir. I am the one that should inherit. And being that no one is a muchzak, even the Chachamim here will agree to Sumchas by saying that that estate will be divided equally. Half will go to the child who's a Safek, and the other half will go to the brother who did Yibum. And let's remember this din for the 4th case. But that's din number 1. Din number 2. We are at the end of the 2nd wide line. Safek, if the din Torah is between the child who's called the Safek, Ubnei Yavam. Let's say Shimon, the Yavam, let's say had 2 sons. And until this moment, Reuven's estate was not divided, was not touched. Now, Reuven's estate is going to be divided. Shimon, the Yavam, is no longer living. So here, the Safek is claiming the same thing. The Safek is claiming that I should certainly get part over here. Let's read it inside. That they're coming to divide the estate of Reuven. Safek says, Hahu Gavra, that person, meaning I, Bar Misnohu, I am the son and the only son of Reuven. And therefore, I should get all of the estate. B'nei Yavam Amri, but the children of Shimon are saying, no, At, Achinu At, you are our brother. And Enachanami, being that you are our brother, you will definitely get some of Reuven's estate, but it will go to you the way everything will be divided equally amongst us. In other words, since you are our father's son, Reuven had no son. So when Reuven died, everything goes to the Yavam, which is Shimon. Now that Shimon died, everything that he got from Reuven, including his own inheritance, everything that he has, will be divided equally amongst the 3 sons. That he tells them, Umenasa hu the islach ba'adon. Menasa means a portion you have with us. So here they're arguing. So in other words, the suffix for sure will get something. The question is, how much will he get? So when he asked the second question, says the Gemara that Savur Rabbanan Kameid Rav Mesharsha Lameimer, that the sages that were learning in front of Rav Mesharsha, they thought initially to say that Masnisani, that this is equal, this is just like the Mishnah that we'll learn later in Daf Kuf. What did we learn in the Mishnah? What will we learn in Mirz Hashem in the Mishnah Daf Kuf? Titnan. Their case was that you had exactly the case that we were learning until now. You have a person who was married, and he fathered children, and then he divorces his wife. And we learned before that there's a takanas chachamim that the second man should not marry her until 3 months pass. The second man did not wait. Same thing, he only waited 2 months, and he married this divorcee. And 7 months after his marriage, she gave birth to a child. So this child is a suffix. And then later, the second husband, husband 2, fathered many other children. So now, husband 1 dies and husband 2 dies, each one leaving their estate for their children. This suffix, says the Mishnah, cannot inherit with neither of the families. Says the Mishnah, who, this suffix, Eina Yoresh Oisam, will not get from either of them. However, Veheim Yorshin Oisai, they will get from him. What's the logic over there? There's a rule that Ein Safek Moitse Medei Vadai. A person who is in doubt cannot take away something from someone who's certain. So the children from the father, from family A, from Kita Achas, they are for sure the children of Reuven. This one, the one who was born 9 months after the divorce of Reuven's wife, they tell him, maybe you are our brother, maybe not. So since we for sure are heirs, and you maybe or maybe not, you can't join us. The suffix then goes to the family of number 2. And he tells them, let me at least inherit with you. And they can tell him the same thing. We are for sure children from the second father, from the other family. You are or not, you are a suffix. So he will not get anything. So now let's apply this logic of ein safek midei vadai vehache ipcha. Here, this logic will be applied, but in the reverse way. What's the reverse way? This is what the Chachamim were attempting to say. We're suggesting to Rav Mesharshia that Hasam Amri Lei, there each family tells the suffix Aisarayo, you prove that you are a child from our father, Ushkoil. And until you bring the proof, so you are only a doubtful child. You are a doubtful sibling. A doubt does not take away from us. We are certainly heirs. Hachi over here, Amar Lahu. Here it's the opposite. Like we mentioned before, the suffix will for sure get something. Because the suffix is either Reuven's child, so he should get all of what Reuven left. And even if he is the child of Shimon, then as a child of Shimon he should get at least that minasa, that portion. So he can tell them, I for sure get. You maybe or maybe not get. So now that you are the suffix, you brother should bring a proof that I am not Reuven's son, and only then can you take. That I Rayu Ushkolu. So when Rav Mesharshia heard this, Rav Mesharshia told him, you cannot compare this suffix Ubnei Yavam with the Mishnah in Daf Kuf. Midami Hasam over there in Daf Kuf. Inu Vadai, like we explained, each family's children, aside of the suffix, are certainly children. He's the only suffix. But Hachi over here, Idi V'Idi suffix. There's a doubt not only on the children of Shimon, but the son, the suffix is also a suffix. He is not, there is no one here that certainly should get. So there is no suffix, there is no vadai. And therefore, Ela idamya lamasnisin. If you want to compare to the Mishnah, lahadamya. This is what I'll tell you. There is part of what you're saying is correct. And that is that if, and what should be the case? So Rashi talks out, being that you cannot compare it to the Mishnah in Daf Kuf, so what will be the din when the suffix and the Bnei Yavam come together? So Rashi says like this. In the worst case scenario for the suffix, meaning that he's not Reuven's son, that he is Shimon's son. Shimon has another 2 sons that are for sure his sons. So even if there are 3 sons, he's one of them, he should get a third of Reuven's estate. So he gets a third. Now, if he's Reuven's son, he for sure gets that third. In other words, for a third of the estate, he's considered a vadai. But for the other 2/3, there's a suffix. He also doesn't have a vadai. Because if he is not Reuven's son, then he should not get more than that third. So when it comes to the other 2/3, there's a doubt whether who should get it. So what did we learn in halacha number 1? That even the chachamim amoyde to sumchas, that whenever there is no one with a chazaka, mamayin hamutal b'safik cholkin. So the other 2/3 are divided half and half. In other words, another third is given to the suffix. And the final third is only given to the 2 brothers. It's only given to the 2 brothers because the suffix for sure got his part. So he'll end up with 2/3, and the other 2 brothers will divide the final third. So that is what Rav Mesharshia told his Talmidim when it came to case number 2. But they brought a Mishnah on Daf Kuf, so he says, do you know to what I'll compare the Mishnah on Daf Kuf? Let me give you a third case. And what's the third case? Lahadamiyah, l'safek u'bnei yavam. That when you have not that, like we said in the second case, that they were fighting over Reuven's estate. But here you have the suffix, and you have the children of Shimon, that they are fighting over Shimon's estate. And as Rashi explains, evidently Shimon had a lot more belongings than Reuven had. So it would be worthwhile for the suffix to consider himself a child of Shimon, and only get a third of that which belongs to Shimon, than him getting all of what belongs to Reuven and nothing from Shimon. That here, the Asam Amri Lei, there the children, the sons, tell the suffix. No, it's the sons for sure are the sons of Shimon. So they tell the suffix, I see Raya da Achunaat, now you bring a proof that you are our brother, Ushkoil. This is the exact case of Daf Kuf, because here the Bnei Shimon, the children of the second husband, they are for sure sons, and they for sure should inherit from their father. So they are vadai. Who is the suffix? The suffix. So ein suffix moitzimidei vadai. Gavaldik. And now the Gemara gives a fourth case. What will be the fourth case? Suffix. You have the suffix again. Ubnei yavam. Now we're going to put the fourth case, building the first case and the new case together. What was the first case we learned? That if it's the suffix and the yavam, that they themselves were fighting over the possessions of the misna of the one who died. There we paskin before that you divide it in half, because mamain hamutul b'suffix cholke. And now that they divided it in half, which means now Shimon got half, and Shimon had other children, and now Shimon died. And again, Shimon had a lot of possessions. After we made the division of case number 1, it's one case on top of the other. Now, what's the debate? The suffix is turning to Shimon's children, and he's telling them, I am Shimon's son as well. I want to get part of his possessions. You can't get it both ways. If you want to get some of Shimon's possessions, that means that you are admitting that you're not Reuven's son. So why did you get half of Reuven's Yerusha? To which the suffix will tell them, you're right, take back. I give up the half that I got. Again, it's in a case that Shimon was a lot wealthier than Reuven. So it's worth it for the suffix to get a third of all of Shimon's possessions than him getting half of Reuven's possession. So Bnei Yavam Amri, so the children of the Yavam are telling him, Aisa Raya da Achunaat, you bring a Raya that you are our brother, Ushkoil, and you can take a third. Amar Lahu Safek, to which the Safek replies to them, Mi manav shaychu. Herzachan, you can't get it both ways. Why not? What does he tell the children of Shimon? I achuchain ana. If I am your brother, then give me a third. Havali minasa b'hadaychu. Let me have my portion. Elamai, you're pushing me away, which is the case number 3. But if you're pushing me away, you're doing it because you are claiming that I am not Shimon's son, I am Reuven's son. If I am Reuven's son, then I should get everything that Reuven left. You have to undo the first psak din when Reuven's possessions were divided between the Safek and the Yavam. V'i bar misna ana, you're pushing me away only because I'm Reuven's son. Then havali palga the palagavuchen ba'doi. Then give me back at least that half. Gavaldik. So what do? It's not simple Safek midei vadai. If you want to push me away, give me back that half. Do you do that? So there's a machlekes between Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yirmiyah. Machlekes Amarayim. Rabbi Abba Amar in the name of Rav Kamdina. Kamdina means that the first din has to stand. In other words, you can't undo the first din. So the first din stands, period. Now you, Safik, you want to get away, you want to take your part together with Shimon, Safik and Vadai, ain't Safik Maitzim Edei Vadai. Comes along Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah says, true, he will not get a full third of Shimon's possessions, but at least he can get that half back, because Hadar Dina, the original din, is revived, and whichever one is better for the Bnei Shimon will happen. If Shimon was very wealthy, then they will not allow him to get a third of Shimon's possession. But at least, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, this Safik will get that original half. In other words, he's going to end up with everything that his father Reuven left. Says the Gemara, Leima beplukta the admin v'Rabbanon komifli. That apparently this argument between Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yirmiyah, whether you say that once a din was paskent and beis din, that's it. You cannot undo it. And everything from now on is like a new din. Or like Rabbi Yirmiyah, that you can revive an old din, that perhaps that is the argument between Admon and Rabbanon. What's the case of Admon and Rabbanon? So we learn in Masechtas Ksubas that if a man owned a field and he was surrounded, let's say, by 4 fields, we'll clarify in a moment whether they were owned by one person or whether they were owned by 4 people. But one thing is for sure, that the owner of the inner field owned a pathway from the public domain to get to his field. He traveled and he returned, and he doesn't remember exactly where was that pathway. So the question is, can he demand from the owner or the owners of the outside fields to get a pathway? Because the Tanan we learn, that if a person traveled and because of him being away for a long time, he forgot he forgot how to get to his field. Admon says, and initially we understand that we're speaking about all of the outside fields being owned by one person. That means that he for sure had a path through that person's fields. He already had something for sure. So Admon says, Yelich b'ktsara, find the closest, the shortest route between the public domain and the inner person's field. Being that he for sure owned a derech, he just doesn't know how long, how big, how much land did he own between the public domain and his field, so let him take the minimum needed, but that he for sure can claim. The Chachamim say that he has no claim. He has to pay. Either yikach loy derech b'mei yamana, either let him pay whatever they demand, even if they demand a crazy number, a very high number, he has to pay for it. Or, and if not, the owner of the outer field can tell him, fly. Yifrach ba'avir. So now the Gemara asks, the question was against the Rabbanan. Adman is right. He for sure owned something. So to explain the opinion of the Chachamim, Rav Yehud in the name of Rav clarified, we're speaking about that the owner who had a field doesn't know where it went, and it could have gone on one of the 4 sides that are owned by 4 different people. So whenever he goes to one owner of a field, that one owner can push him to another owner. Your derech, your path was on the adjacent by the other person's field. So ask the Gemara, if that's the case, that they belong to 4 people, then why does Admon say that he does get a derech? True, only ktsara, but he gets a derech. So the Amar Rav explained that ba'arba the asimikoich arba, that you're right, if 4 people would have owned it originally and there are 4 people now, or even if originally it was only owned by one person and now when he returned, when he forgot, ba'arba the asimikoich had enachanami kol almod loy pligi. Everyone will agree with the Chachamim, even Admon Deloy, the matzu matchile, that he can be pushed away. Each owner can tell him, your derech was not by me. Ki pligi, when do they argue? Bechad, that there is now one owner. And originally there were 4 owners. Admon Savad, Admon holds, Matzi Amarle, Mikol Makim, Darki Gabachu. You own now one field. True that it used to belong to 4 different people, but I can tell you that somewhere in what you possess now, I own a path. And the Rabbanan hold the Amar Lei, the owner can tell him, Herzachain, shaskas, if you'll be quiet, in other words, if you're not going to make a tumult and pay me what I want, is good. And ve'iloi, and if not, let me tell you what I will do. That I will return the field to its 4 original owners, and now you'll have to go to them, and you will not win the entire with them, like we said before, that ain't suffik might vadai, because if he goes to every owner of the field to tell them that, I don't know, I'm the muhzik, maybe you had your derech in the adjacent field. So how is that connected? So the Gemara suggests, Lema Rav Abba holds like the Rabbanan. That Rav Abba, who was the one that said that Kam Dina holds like the Rabbanan. What did the Rabbanan say over here? Kam Dina. How did they say Kam Dina? Even though that originally, when it used to belong to 4 people, then he could have. But now that it was, since when it belonged to 4 people, he would not get his derech, because everyone will push him off to the other one. So that din that he does not get his path remains, even though something new happened, even though it belongs now to 1 person. However, perhaps Admoin, who says he will get a derech, holds that when it belonged to 4 people, Taki, he would not get a derech. But now, Hadar Dina, now you can revive the din. Now that it belongs to 1 person, he can claim the inner field that I for sure have a pathway on the land surrounding me. So says the Gemara, so Lema, Rav Abba, Rabbanan, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Admon. So Amalach, so the Gemara concludes that Rav Abba will tell you that I know the Amri Afilu Ka'admoin, Rav Abba, who holds normally that Kamdina, I will say like Admoin. And Admoin's din is not because of Hadar Dina, but like he said himself, because over there Admon says that he gets a field, because he tells him, like Rashi says, he has a tainas body. I for sure had a pathway. So because he has a certain taina, that's why he gets it. But when it comes to the suffix, the child who's a suffix doesn't have a taina's body. He, at the end of the day, he does not know who his father is. And likewise, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amarlach, I can even hold like the Rabbanan. When did the Rabbanan say over there that he does not get a pathway? That's because the current owner has a gevaldik taina that does not exist over here. Like the Chachamim said, because the Amar Lei, because the current owner tells the person who has a land in the middle that if you'll be quiet is good. In other words, if you'll concede to pay me for a derech is good. And if not, I will give back my documents to the original owners, and you will not be able to get anything from either of the owners. That taina is a very strong taina that only exists in the case of Admon and the Chachamim. Aval hachi, but here by the case when there's a suffix and the Bnei Yavam, Mikel Ameimer hachi, so one is not connected to the other. That was a gewaldige piece of Gemara, and God willing to be continued.